Well, happy Thursday to you. I'm Marlon Boulding, your tour guide to the ag commodities. Well, we thank you for joining us today. It's a very busy day because on Thursday, we always get our weekly export sales numbers, and we did get them this morning. I do want to give you a refresher on what we actually did in the overnight trade. So we'll get to that in a second here. On the corn overnight, we had total sales this past week of 1.76 million tons. That was a big jump up from last week. And soybeans, 928,000 tons. That was a drop from what we had a week ago. Soy meal, 169,600 tons this time around. That was lower. I think it was about half of what we had last week. Soy oil, 900 tons. And on the wheat, we had 168,900 tons. Now, we had a big number on grain sorghum today. I was surprised at that. Usually it doesn't hardly move the needle. And this morning, 110,500 tons of grain sorghum. That was a bit of a surprise. And upland cotton came in at 191,400 running bales. That was a decline from last week, I believe. Rice, 24,400 tons. Then, of course, we had numbers on the meat side, and we'll get to them in our next segment. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and take a look at what took place in our overnight trade. So let's go to the big board and take a look at our corn market. It was higher. Now, of course, this Globex trade actually wrapped up before, or no, excuse me, it wrapped up right after the weekly export nails numbers came out. So here we had corn a little bit higher, and it was led by the nearby contract. So the trade did like that high export sales number. We're 4 higher at 685 per bushel, and you had December penny and a half higher at 597 3/4. Let's move on through these and take a look at the soybean number. Soybeans managed to close 10 cents higher yet at 15.30 1/4. We had July up 8 3/4 cents in the overnight trade. And in the new crop November contract on the soybeans, well, we wrapped up with them trading 7 3/4 higher at 13.68. So a big improvement there. And again, I'll remind you, these closed up at about 7:45 Central Time after we actually got the weekly export sales numbers released. Now let's take a look at the wheat in Chicago. Look at that, March 4 1/4 higher at 7.64. Let's go to the hard red winter wheat in Kansas City. Well, we had March 3 1/2 higher. We were at 8.87 3/4. Spring wheat trade in Minneapolis overnight. We had the March 3 1/2 higher at 929 1/2. And just to touch on that cotton board, we had the March cotton up 37 points at 85.98, but December was unchanged at 85.26. All right, so I want to bring in Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions. Brian, looking at all these weekly export sales numbers, that was pretty impressive on the corn, was it not?
Yeah, it certainly was, Marlon. In the corn market, right when the report came out, was trading maybe 3/4 or so of a cent higher. And then after the export numbers came out, and those were well above expectations, it rallied to close 4 cents better. So a lot of it was priced into the market already, but it was a very strong number. And a lot of people that watch your programs ask me, how can you say that these unknown destinations are actually probably going to end up being China? We had all these private sale announcements last week, and China's supposed to be on their holiday, but it was to an unknown buyer. And if you look at these numbers, unknown destinations were big buyers of both corn and soybeans. But you look at China specifically, they had bought over 26 million bushels of soybeans last week, and over 22.5 of those million bushels were switched from an unknown destination to actually China. And they did the same thing in the corn market. China was a pretty decent buyer, over 12 million bushels of corn, but the unknown destination bought 16 million bushels. And a lot of what China reported has bought this week was actually switched to from the unknown destination category back to China. So little games are being played, but more often than not, when you see unknown destination, it's going to end up being China. And that's what the market is kind of looking forward to, is any of these private sales that we get. So hopefully we'll continue to see some strong exports are picking up in the corn market. Soybeans have continued to remain strong and probably will for the next several weeks, as we don't have a lot of competition here in early part of February, and even into the middle of February. The slow harvest pace in Brazil, slow planting pace in Argentina is going to push their exports back into probably April, May timeframe, and it's going to leave this window open here for the U.S. to get some more export business.
Good point. All right, we'll come back, and I want to take a look at the beef and pork sales too. We'll do that right after this. Well, as I mentioned, we actually got the weekly beef and pork export sales numbers too from USDA, and they might be a bit enlightening. Look at the beef number, 25,200 tons. If I remember right, I think that's within 200 tons of what we had last week. Another week of very good sales. We had pork coming in at 30,900 tons, and last week that was around 44,000 tons, I believe. Let's go back to Brian Hoops and talk about these numbers here. I saw where China was a buyer of beef. I believe they bought over 4,000 tons. You know how much they bought of pork last week? None.
Nothing.
Zero, a goose egg. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think you mentioned that the pork sales were down about 15 million tons from a week ago, and I think that is going to be allocated to China not being in the market. Now, they did take some shipments, so if you look at the shipment numbers, they did receive some product, but they didn't buy anything new, and I think that's a disappointment here, especially when you have April hog futures down in the mid 80s, sitting on weekly support. A lot of people looking for that market to finally bounce out of here and rally, and we're not going to do that without China being buyer of U.S. pork. The beef sales, as you mentioned, right in line with where they had been previously. I thought that was a decent number a week ago. It's a good number again this week. And again, some of these foreign Asian countries, Japan, South Korea, to a lesser extent, China being the best buyers of U.S. beef products, but we are shipping some product, and that's a very good indication, I think.
Well, let's look at the cattle prices and how we closed yesterday. We had the April live cattle 80 cents lower. They finished at 162.22 yesterday, so we'll see if they want to change that direction this morning or not. It was a lousy day on the feeders yesterday. April was down $2.10 at 187.95. They flipped their roll from the live cattle spread the day before. On the lean hogs, we had April down 212 at 84.30 yesterday per hundredweight. So after these new export sales numbers, we'll see if they can build on that or not. All right. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Always good to talk with you. And we'll catch up with you here real soon. That's Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions.